real. All right, I'll hit start talk now. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for a very special VMware Tanzu webinar. Today, I'd like to introduce our very special speakers. We have Brian Friedman, Rahul Jain, and Danielle Bo. But before we get started, I have a few housekeeping items that we'd like to cover. First, this is an interactive session, so please feel free to ask us anything using the Ask a Questions box below your presentation screen. We'll do our best to answer all of your questions live through today's presentation. In addition, we know that you guys are here to hear from us, but we'd love to hear from you. So leave us feedback using the Rate This tab also below your presentation screen. Let us know how we did, how we're doing, and which events you'd like to hear in the future. Now, without further ado, let's hand this off to the team. Brian?
Thank you for that. Again, my name is Brian Friedman. I'm the solutions lead in the Americas for the RPM team, the Rapid Portfolio Modernization team. And today we're here to talk about modernization, the fact that it's hard, but it's also necessary, and some of the tools and techniques we use to accelerate modernization with respect to tooling and the data that it can provide us. So the reasons why we modernize, they're pretty simple. We want to be more nimble, want to gain operational agility, and most importantly, we want to tighten our innovation cycles. To innovate faster and to be effective, you have to have modern platforms, platforms that can help you take competitive advantage of the capabilities of the cloud. And it's challenging for good reason. If you think about all the stuff how it all got here to begin with, much of the software that's out there now was built prior to the millennium. In the early 2000s, we still had Moore's Law on our side. Drop some code on a server. If it runs too slow under load, no worries. In 2 years, we'll have twice as much memory, twice as much processor. Those days are gone. So on top of that aging tech, maybe we've added some capabilities using new technology, and then a few years pass and we do it again and we do it again. And over time, we have this massive superimposition of complexity. And those layers upon layers of complexity make it very difficult to do things like identifying suitable candidates for modernization. Again, you've got layers of new built on top of old. It's important that you go beyond the surface in order to get a true assessment of what's actually capable of moving to a modern platform. And of course, that superimposition of complexity really renders itself in the form of dependencies between applications. They can be deep, they can be tangled, and it can be very difficult to get a handle on what's talking to what. And depending on how long you've been on your journey with virtual machines, maybe you started before there was automation out there that was really helping ensure that what belonged in production got to production. It may be difficult to get an inventory of what's actually running in your environment. And if you don't know what's running in your environment, I mean, forget about CVEs and OWASP. How can you be confident in your security posture? And ultimately, what it comes down to is the fact that modernization in itself is not a one-time event, it's a continuum. And so how do you create a strategy that responds to change, that allows you to respond to internal pressures, external pressures, things beyond your control, and not lose value when you pivot? And then most importantly, if we're doing a data center migration, when you think about this, the whole point of the data center migration is to preserve the present. We're successful if everything feels the same when that migration is done. If we're going to invest time and people in migration, in preserving the present, it absolutely makes sense to spend investment in your future at the same time. So how do we go about collecting all the information that we need if we don't have tooling? Well, if you rely on manual techniques, there's going to be a lot of toil involved. There's going to be surveying people, for example, stakeholders, operations, enterprise architects that may know the connective tissue between IT and business. And ultimately, surveys are flawed in that the responses are subjective. Not only does it matter who we ask, it matters how we ask the question. And so we can't just rely on information that we get from people. So then we try to look to documentation, which is often stale, often out of date. I was hands-on keyboards for 20 years. I wrote several documentations and frequently, quite cynically, thought, it's fantastic. Nobody's going to read this. So relying on out-of-date documentation, relying on perhaps subjective information is not going to establish a cadence of success. So today, what we're going to talk about is how can we accelerate modernization and migration efforts using tools and processes that our team has curated over the years and we now deliver to our customers to bring value to their transformation programs. In our practice, we do use a lot of tools, and I know we're here to talk about tools, but I want to put some context around it. The tools are not silver bullets. We rely on tools to gather data quickly, but we rely on our people to contextualize, to synthesize, to distill signal from noise, and to produce an actionable plan for your migration efforts. So, tools to collect large amounts of data quickly, and sometimes to help with correlation of data, but people to interpret the data, people to present an actionable go forward plan. And so we might wonder, what does a actionable go forward plan look like as far as cloud transformation is concerned? Well, in our view, it doesn't look like a Gantt chart or a spreadsheet of apps sorted from easiest to hardest. In our view, an actionable plan looks a lot like a funnel. We identify the technical, business, and organizational factors required to model the disposition and prioritization of modernization efforts. We feed that model the data that we've collected from both tools and people to mechanize our migration and modernization decisions. It's very important that we mechanize. We want to take emotion out of decision making in what is a program that's critical to your business's success. And I don't want to get too deep on the funnel concept for now. We will circle back to it. What's important here, what the takeaway is that the funnel provides a journey with respect to what we should do next and where it should go. Today, we're going to focus just on the technical factors that and two of the tools that we use to feed the funnel and get some insights. We start with tools that instrument your environment, and they allow us to automate a lot of discovery, allow us to identify candidate applications that are suitable for a move to the cloud, and perhaps to identify some of the work that needs to be done to applications that are not yet suitable for cloud. So the first tool we're going to talk about is vRealize Network Insight, affectionately called Verni. Verni provides infrastructure and network discovery capabilities. And what's really impressive about Verni is it's agentless. A lot of the things that get the information that you're going to see my partner Rahul present require obtrusive process, some form of installation on hosts. Verni is a collector. It's all network based. Can help us monitor policies, perform infrastructure discovery, identify modernization candidates. Maybe you got some Tomcat apps floating around out there that are prime for containerization. Can monitor your network usage and help you identify areas where data gravity is super intense between systems, where you know there's a great deal of integration just through the chatter, and gives you kind of an idea with that data gravity view of what's the potential cost implication of separating one system from another and putting one out in the cloud. Performance aside, cost is also very important. And then also, as I touched on before, if you still have a data center, you've got to optimize. You can't, if you're not leaving that data center, it's not just about move, don't improve. It's about strategically moving resources and identifying what you have that can help take competitive advantage of the cloud and bring value back to your business quickly. The second tool that we're going to talk about today is less about looking under the apps at the network and more about looking inside the apps, which is certainly a differentiator with respect to how RPM operates. We use a tool, Cloud Suitability Analyzer, and CSA provides line of code level application insights as well as portfolio level application insights. More specifically, we can do things like assess the technical feasibility to deploy an application to a modern platform, again, based on the content of the code. We can discover what languages are used within a polyglot application or languages at play across a polyglot portfolio. And we can get technical debt reports on each application, which gives us some really powerful capabilities that Rahul is going to get into when it comes into analyzing and prioritizing for economies of scale. And most importantly, CSA gives us kind of a notional capability of where to find where the interesting things will be in a code base. We're going to find things that look really good, things that look really bad. In our experience, it's the things right in the middle that have the widest distribution of problems that can unlock cloud potential for multiple applications in your portfolio. And at this point, I'd like to hand over to my partner Rahul for a deep dive on the insights that these tools can help us gain and how we use those insights to inform and accelerate our plans.
Great, thanks, Brian. Hi, I'm Rahul Jain. I'm from the same team as Brian from the RPM team within VMware. And the goal today, or the objective today, is to discuss about all the migration and modernization challenges that we have on hand today. And we would actually like to discuss 5 types of data. And regarding each of the data, we would like to dig in further on what insights can they provide and how do they influence our roadmap. So without any delay, let's actually begin. Application dependencies. Using the tool that Brian mentioned, Verney, this tool actually captures all the network flows that are flowing between the various virtual machines that are managed via a data center. Using this data, we can do an informed migration wave planning. The network flows provide us insights on how complex your infrastructure and network layout is for each of the application. This helps us define the dispositions for the applications and the order in which these applications can be migrated or modernized. Let's take a look at how we grab this data out of Verney. As Brian briefly touched, we have Verney that's available in 2 offerings. You have an on-prem edition, and then you have a hosted offering. You can choose to go with any. We recommend installing Verney in a production or a production-like environment. We need a lot of chatter that's going on between all the VMs because that's how we can learn more about your infrastructure, your VMs, your applications, and that's how we can derive your dependencies. To begin with, we need to configure the data sources like vCenter, AWS, etc. And once we have configured those in Verney, we have a component, the Verney collector, that starts collecting data. For example, it starts collecting the data, which is internet flows, and it also collects the data which is all running within your private VLAN, which is called the intranet flows. And this data is made available to the Verney platform. Now, Verney platform is what that has the Verney console through which you can access all the data. Now, the flows that we are discussing over here, they contain significant metrics around the network throughput. It has the information about the VMs, the source, and the destination. It also has the IP information regarding each of these. It collects the data regarding all the ports on which these VMs are communicating on, and it has the various protocols, the session information, and the data traffic that is flowing in and out from each and every VM. Now, once we have all this data that is being pumped from the collector into Verney, it's all available on your UI, and it's all real time. Now, once we export the data out of Verney, what do? That's the interesting part. Now, this is where we, the RPM team, come into play. We analyze the raw data to then identify the relationships between the applications using the flows. Once the relationships have been identified, we generate a dependency graph that helps us visualize and determine like which of these VMs have low dependencies that can be migrated fast without impacting the overall system. Using the flow data, we also report on the VMs that have high network bandwidth requirements and high active sessions. This helps us drive destination cloud network requirements. If we are designing a cloud on AWS or Azure, we definitely need this input to make sure that our applications are able to run and produce the same amount of performance to our end users. That's not all. We also captured the TCP and UDP ports that are accepting traffic between the VMs. This helps in defining the network policies for the destination cloud environment. And all this data that we see is made available in a raw format, and we humans come into play to analyze this data and make it available in a format that you can chew on. Next, let's talk about end-of-life stacks. This is our next data point. Every company strives to secure their infrastructure and application environments, and so do we. As Warney discovers workloads from the various configured data sources, it captures the details on the operating system on which your applications are running. This helps us identify the virtual machines that are vulnerable and prone to attacks. We know the world isn't that good and attacks keep happening. So we want to make sure that we are operating in a highly secure environment. So to provide a secure environment for your applications to run, we analyze this raw data and provide a roadmap on how to mitigate these risks. So let's look at how do I extract this data out of Warning. In Warning, we have a section wherein you can select the environment, and from that, you can select the vCenter or vCenters that's of interest. Here, we export the data as a CSV. Once we hit this button, there's an option or there's a pop-up that pops up, which allows us to add or remove properties that we want to export. This is where we make sure that we have the operating system selected. And once we have all the required properties that we want to extract out of this report, we just go ahead and we export the raw data. Again, we have a raw data. What do we do with it? We again need humans, as we discussed. And this is where we need to massage the data to understand what are the different operating systems that are operating within our data center or your data centers. What are the versions of those operating systems that are running within the data center? We also need, using that information, we actually massage the data to understand which of these operating systems are already end of life or nearing end of life. As we know, with end of life VMs, we end up or you end up paying a lot more on extended support. We want to reduce the cost, and we want to make sure that you benefit by migrating to the modern operating systems that are suitable for your applications. This is where we come in and we craft a charter to help you understand which of these operating systems that you're running within your data center have extended support provided by the vendors. That's one way of looking at how you can reduce your cost. The other way is to eliminate paying for extended support. You might choose to upgrade these operating systems to the later versions or the newer versions that are available. And this is the roadmap that we help you with so that you can have some actionable items to work on. And when you upgrade or when you replace the operating systems, you can actually have the potential cost savings. The next data point that we want to discuss over here is application resource utilization. As we know, traditionally, as applications get onboarded or packaged within VMs, their footprints are small. Maybe they just start with 1 gig of memory and one CPU. But as time flies, in reality, we have seen that we end up oversizing the VMs to make sure that it's giving the right benefits to our end users. So we start consuming a lot more memory and CPU from the underlying infrastructure. A lot of teams use this pattern as an advantage, and then they put in requests for higher hardware requirements, even though they don't need it. This is where we use Warney, which captures the resource consumptions for VMs for each of the applications and its dependent services that are running on the VMs. Using this information, we can provide insights on how you can efficiently operate your data center by optimizing the resource consumption, which would result in potential cost savings. Let's dig in a little more on how do we capture this data out of Warney. Similar to the previous flow, we log into Warney and we select the environment followed by the vCenters that are of interest. And this is where we export a report out of Warney. Similar to the previous flow, there's a pop-up that would come in, which would allow us to choose the properties that we want to export as part of the report. Now, this is where we choose all the properties that are relevant for memory and CPU. And once we have those intact with all the other properties, we go ahead and export the raw data. Again, we have a raw data, and someone has to help us massage this data to consume it in a way wherein there are some actionable items. So we RPM team again jump in, look at the raw data to analyze it to figure out which of these applications in your portfolio and VMs on which these are hosted are consuming more memory, and which of these are CPU intense. We basically look for a threshold of probably 80% and above. So that clearly tells us that these VMs need to be sized appropriately based on the application needs. There is an opportunity wherein the application teams can think on how to make best use of the underlying hardware and leverage the elastic scaling capability to horizontally scale the applications. And this is where we would love to have some dialogues with your application architects to help them understand what cloud native patterns they can bring in to help address this problem. We also go after the applications that are underutilizing the resources. And this is an opportunity for our infrastructure architects to reclaim the resources which are not being used. That's pretty cool, right? We also go after your entire data center and try to analyze how the resources are being consumed on each of your physical hosts. As we know, within vCenter, we have the notion of clusters, and under clusters, we have a lot of hosts. This visual over here represents how well you have balanced all your VMs across the host and how well you're using your vCenter capabilities to make sure that all these VMs are highly available and using all the best practices that comes with vCenter. These are the concerns that we try to bubble up, and we would like to see your underlying infrastructure being utilized in a way wherein we feel is the right way to operate our infrastructure. This would bring in potential cost savings, and also the operation cost for your data center would reduce. All right, moving along. Technical feasibility. We assume that all the applications that are running on VMs are probably suitable for modern cloud platforms like Kubernetes. But that isn't true. We know that. And we need a way to identify what are the gaps in these applications and why are we unable to just port these applications as is into Kubernetes. As Brian mentioned, there's a tool which we use, which is an open source tool called Cloud Suitability Analyzer that provides us insights on the technical debt for application, using which we can define an appropriate cloud migration strategy for the applications. Let's dig in a bit. This is Cloud Suitability Analyzer. It's an open source, as I mentioned, which is available on GitHub. And it's an executable that can execute on any cross-platform. For example, it can run on Linux, Windows, your Macs. So using this executable, what we try to do is we try to scan through all your application source code to derive a technical score. The higher the technical score, the more suitable the application is for replatforming. The lower the score, the application needs significant rewrite. A medium score signifies the app needs a bit or a lot of refactoring. Now, using the UI, we export this data in a raw format. And again, humans are involved to massage this data and to make sure that we can have some actionable item or actionable plan to work on. So using the findings that come out of CSA and using the technical score, we derive a technical feasibility score. Using the technical findings that we had for each of the applications, we are in a good position to define an application journey. For example, is the application A good for refactoring, or is it a rewrite, or is it good for replatform? We can make pretty good judgment based on what archetypes and what findings we receive from CSA for each of these applications. Outside this tool, we conduct surveys. We also look at your ITSM tools. We try to find any means to find the business importance for each of these applications. And once we have that raw data, we try to determine the business value score for each of these applications. Now, why are these two scores really important for us? We craft a 2x2 matrix across the business value and a technical feasibility. The higher or the right quadrant, the top right quadrant, are the actionable apps on which you can right away act on, and you can straight away take through them on the appropriate application journey that we have carved out. And this provides a pretty good roadmap for the customers to start walking from the top apps And lower down the list, you can just go on addressing the concerns to modernize and accelerate your application modernization journey. All right. And the last data point that I would like to cover today is the application archetypes. We have been talking a lot about archetypes, but what is it in general? So, application archetype in our terms is and if I have to define it in a simple way, it's identification of coding language, the runtime environment, the frameworks used by the application or applications to communicate with the downstream services like databases, messaging, or any other underlying service. It also looks for all the packages, for example, that are being used to do logging or do any file operations. So an archetype is a grouping of all these findings that can help us identify what are the technical similarities between various applications. But now think about a portfolio which is large enough. We cannot go after each and every application and then try to figure out how do I solve a pattern for all these 1,000 applications. It's going to be forever, wherein you would be sitting and churning through these 1,000 apps. So there should be an easy way on how we can group these 1,000 apps into just 10 groups. This is where we use Cloud Suitability Analyzer that helps us capture the archetypes for each application by inspecting the source code. It provides us the data points on how applications can be grouped based on technical similarities. We'll talk a little more about it in the next few slides. Using that data, we provide a plan for the application groups that your teams can focus on to accelerate the application modernization efforts. Let's take a look at CSA again. When you log into CSA UI, you would see that there are a bunch of tags that are generated here. Now, what are these tags? These tags are basically all the application findings that have been bucketed into high-level tags or categories, using which we can identify what kind of app this is. For example, the app that we are looking at right now, the Docker JPEG Store WLP, is actually using servlets. It's using HTTP sessions. It's a stateful app, and it basically is a classical JEE web app. Now, similarly, we can, when CSA runs across all your applications in the portfolio, it generates all these tags, which we consume it once we have the raw data out of this tool. Now, this is where we export the data again from the tool to then massage it in such a way that we can identify how to group these applications based on the archetypes or the tags that we have figured out in the previous step. Now, in this view, you can easily see that this grouping provides us common patterns that are available across various applications. How does this help you in your modernization journey? So think about it. If an application group just goes after all those patterns that are bubbled up, for example, there are applications that are dependent on IO. They're using HTTP sessions. There are hard-coded IPs and etc. in your portfolio. So each application group can go about addressing these concerns, and they can document and solution them and make it available on your internal wiki. And once someone has solved this pattern, they can then replicate this pattern across all the various applications. And that's how you can build out your center of excellence, which has a catalog of all the possible solutions. And two, it would help you move faster in your cloud migration journey. At this point, since we spoke a lot about all the technical factors that helps us build out the initial funnel, I would pass it back to Brian to give us some more thoughts on how we use the funnel going forward. Brian, over to you.
Thank you so much for that, for those insights, Rahul. I am definitely a big geek for the CSA and archetype conversation and the economies of scale that it drives. I love it. Also, really, when you think about it, if you're not looking inside the app, any disposition decision is really just a guess, and CSA helps us differentiate ourselves by offering an informed opinion, much better outcome than a guess. So here we are back at the funnel. I did promise we'd circle back to this. What's important to remember is that we've only discussed technical factors today. We are very, very, very much hoping that you do not drive decisions for your business based solely on technical factors. It's very, very important that we pay close attention to, or more accurately, practically be obsessed with business value. Why are we doing what we're doing? What are we gaining? Again, if we put a bunch of engineers in a room and work with only technical constraints in mind, we're just going to run out of money. It's fundamental that these modernization programs, which are quite expensive in aggregate, are laser focused on delivering value back to the business, whether that's an element of self-funding from reducing a data center footprint, or a gain in revenue by stabilizing and cloud enabling your differentiating capabilities, or maybe you want to decrease your carbon footprint. We've had customers with all kinds of goals when it comes to modernization and optimization. And this is why it's so critically important for aligning to the business and demonstrating judicious use of our dollars and our people. And thankfully, we have expertise in this space. And I would be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity to give you a little insights into our service. Rapid Portfolio Modernization, it's VMware's answer to minimizing the time between right now and scaling your modernization effort. As you've seen during this talk, we have some incredibly insightful and, in my opinion, just plain fun tooling that helps us dig into and explore from both directions. Look under the apps, determine the technology, the move groups, the data gravity, but then also look inside the apps to determine, are they vulnerable? Are they suitable for cloud? Maybe classify our app source code in a manner that promotes economies of scale. These are things we're really good at. We also have experience in the know-how to model the critical decision points required to navigate your cloud journey, and to be data-driven and unemotional in your planning and your governance. And that's what our Navigator offering really focuses on. We help you de-risk your journey by using the funnel to move through the portfolio in chunks rather than boiling the ocean. And the primary benefit here being, if you spend a lot of time on discovery and analysis, by the time you're done, things have changed. Also, as we've all learned through the Agile revolution, we de-risk by iterating, by not trying to eat the entire challenge in one go. And we believe the best way to de-risk is to avoid things like premature optimizations and over-tooling, and again, to approach the task iteratively, and really to allow real-world work and findings to inform your plan. And so just to wrap up here, we also help with accelerating customers. You've maybe established your modernization program, things aren't moving fast enough. We can help distill anti-patterns that repeat across your entire portfolio and identifying strategies for impacting tranches of applications rather than handling things one at a time. Our software archaeologists, as we like to call them, are seasoned engineers with hands-on keyboards experience, sifting through legacy bits for opportunities to modernize using techniques like shimming, strangling, consolidating code for reuse, and solving hard problems, creating recipes that allow your teams or your SI, or in conjunction with us, or a combination of all, to move the needle in your transformation program. The whole idea for acceleration is to pave the path of least resistance for material progress and gains and schedule compression. And again, we're VMware. We're here to help you scale. Our teams, your teams, SI teams, combinations. We're going to help you reach the finish line faster through our smart techniques and our breadth of experience. And I just want to take the time to thank you so much for listening today. And we'd love to answer some questions before we wrap up.
Great. Thank you so much, Brian and Rahul. Let's jump into the questions. And for those of you watching, please feel free to put any questions you have in the question box on your screen. But let's move to the first one. So the first question is Cloud Suitability Analyzer for VMware only? And can it be used in Kubernetes clusters?
Cloud Suitability Analyzer likes code. It doesn't care where the code goes. So if you've got a repo, Cloud Suitability Analyzer can be helpful.
Great. And there's another question related to Cloud Suitability Analyzer. Can it be used in a CI/CD pipeline?
Yes, definitely. It's an executable that can be bundled and it can be run on your Jenkins pipelines, or it could be anywhere in Concourse or any CI tool that you're using. So this can definitely inspect the code. It can spit out some reports using which you can either cause some build failures or something of that sort. So yes, it is something that you can plug in directly into your CI pipelines.
Great.
I've even seen customers track cloud native drift. Are applications drifting further from cloud native because their score over time is reducing? Yes, CSA is open source and available on GitHub.
Yes.
Great. The next question we have is related to Vernie. And the question is, does Vernie work in the cloud or just on-prem?
So we have Wordly that's available as a hosted offering, and it can be installed on-prem. So if there are any security concerns to not allow any flows or data to go out to the internet, you can definitely go ahead and install the on-prem edition, or you can safely use the hosted version to monitor all the traffic flows in AWS, your on-prem, Azure, and so on.
Okay. And then there's another question, kind of out of the two tools you talked about, can we use, so is just CSA open source? Can we use both of them, or are these exclusive to VMware services teams?
I can
So
take the CSA,
yeah,
and I'm sure Rahul can answer the Vernie. Again, CSA is agnostic to whatever platform you're using. CSA scans code for technical debt with respect to 12-factor. So what that means is if it finds that you're talking to local disk, if it finds that you're using non-standard logging techniques, not logging to standard out, maybe you've got affinities to some file IO on an SMB, those are the kinds of things we're going to find, and those are the kinds of things that are going to creep up on you if you don't look inside the app first. So that scoring that you saw is all based on how many things with respect to cloud native to 12-factor did we find that were violations in the application.
yeah. And talking about a vRealize Network Insight, it's actually a paid software. And once the software is installed, it basically helps us do your infrastructure and network discovery. And using that data, we can actually analyze how intertangled your applications and VMs are. So really, if we put the hat on, can I use one over the other? They both are solving two different aspects. One is helping us learn more about your application dependencies when they're actually running in an environment. And CSA helps us understand how suitable your applications are for the cloud migration. As Brian mentioned, it looks for those code smells, the cloud native patterns, and that helps us help you understand on how you should put on a hat of refactoring or rewriting your applications to make it cloud native.
Great, thank you. There's another question about Cloud Suitability Analyzer and how we can get our hands on it. Someone would like to use it.
Oh, cool. We would love you to try it out. You know, it's available on GitHub. We would be glad to share the links with you all, and feel free to download. And we are open for feedback. If there are any PRs that you would love to raise, and if you would like to contribute back to the community, please feel free to do so.
Yeah, and to that point, Rahul, there's actually a link in the attachments to the Cloud Suitability GitHub repo, and also a blog with a demo on Cloud Suitability Analyzer. So lots of info in the attachments.
And it really is, just to underscore, uniquely differentiating to treat your code as a data source for your modernization planning. If you take anything away from this webinar, hopefully you understand the value of actually looking inside the app, not relying strictly on network location and business value.
Absolutely. One other question that's just come in, someone's asking if we can advise them on where they can start to learn about Tanzu. I would recommend visiting the Tanzu Developer Center at tanzu.vmware.com/developer. Brian, Rahul, do you have any other recommendations?
No, I think that's bang on. That link actually takes the user to all the possible directions, like how to use the platform, how to set up a platform, what are our offerings from VMware. So that's the link that you should actually go visit.
Great.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, I think we've covered all the questions. I don't see any more coming in today. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you to Brian and Rahul. This event has been recorded and will be available to view again and share on demand shortly after the end of this presentation. Hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you
Thanks
all.
all.